Not every Jeep on the road is a real Jeep. Today, we call all big cars by this name. But Jeep is the name of a specific American brand. Only a company from Detroit makes real Jeeps. This is how it happened. In 1940, there was a big war in the world. The U.S. Army needed a new vehicle very much. They needed a special military transport. This vehicle had to be light. It had to drive on bad roads. It had to drive without roads, too. The car had to have four-wheel drive. This is important for off-road. The weight had to be under 1,300 pounds. That is about 590 kilograms. The engine needed at least 40 horsepower. It sounds funny now, but it was 1940. The car had to carry 4 soldiers. The soldiers had their weapons. It had to pull a small cannon. The U.S. Army wanted this car very fast. Generals sent a request to 135 companies. They asked for a prototype in a short time. The term was only 49 days. Most companies did not even answer. They thought the task was too hard. They thought it was impossible to work so fast. Only 3 firms decided to try. These were Bantam, Willys Overland, and Ford. Each company wanted a big military contract. The contract gave much work and money. The Bantam company was the smallest one. It was in Butler, Pennsylvania. Bantam did not have a big staff, so they invited an experienced designer. His name was Karl Probst. He lived and worked in Detroit. Probst started the drawings in June 1940. He drew the plans very quickly. Some say he did it in 18 hours. The design was simple and smart. Bantam built the first prototype fast. They called it the Bantam Reconnaissance Car. People called it BRC for short. Sometimes they called it the Blitz Buggy. The prototype was ready in September 1940. It arrived at the Army base quickly. The base was Camp Holabird in Maryland. The Army started tests immediately. The prototype drove well in the mud. It drove well on sand and rocks. The car was light, but very strong. The soldiers were happy with the car. But the Bantam company had a problem. They did not have big factories. They could not build thousands of cars. The Army wanted many cars very fast, so the military gave the drawings to others. They wanted the firms to work together. This made the work go faster. Willys Overland also made a prototype. They called it the Quad. The word quad means 4. The car had a powerful engine. They called the engine Go Devil. Its power was 60 horsepower. The Quad arrived at the base in November. The car showed very good results. It drove easily on hard roads. It moved through mud and over hills. The Ford company also worked fast. They made their own prototype. They called it the Pygmy. The car appeared 10 days after the Quad. All 3 prototypes were very similar. These were BRC, Quad, and Pygmy. They all used ideas from Karl Probst. The Army looked at all the cars. The military decided to take the best parts. They took good parts from each prototype. They took the general idea from Bantam. They took the strong engine from Willys. Ford created a simple radiator grille. It was flat and easy to make. In the end, they made one model. That is how the standard Jeep was born. Karl Probst made the biggest contribution. At first, he worked for no money. Later, they paid him only $200, but his drawings were the base of the Jeep. The car would not exist without Probst. Engineers from Bantam, Willys, and Ford worked well. They improved the prototypes together. The army performed very strict tests. The tests were in the mountains. The tests were in thick forests. They were even in the water. The Jeep could go anywhere. Ordinary cars got stuck there. The Jeep could pull a heavy cannon. It could carry wounded soldiers. The car was very simple. It was easy to fix in the field. Soldiers could fix it themselves. The legendary Jeep was born in 1941. It was an idea from the US Army. But the real car came from designers. Karl Probst is the father of the Jeep. His simple drawings changed history. The small, strong car was ready for war. Soldiers soon saw its power in battle. The army gave the first big order in 1941. The Willys Company won the contract. They had to build 16,000 cars. One car cost about $739. They called the new model the Willys MB. Later, Ford also received a contract. Their model was called the Ford GPW. The letter W stood for Willys. Both cars were almost the same. There were only small differences. For example, the radiator grills were different. At first, production was not very fast. Workers learned how to build new cars. But everything changed after a few months. The factories worked at full power in 1942. They built hundreds of Jeeps every day. Workers labored in 3 shifts. They built 640,000 Jeeps by 1945. Willys built about 363,000 cars. Ford built about 280,000 Jeeps. Bantam built only about 2,600 cars. It was very little compared to others, but these cars still helped the US Army. Jeeps had a very simple design. This was a very big advantage. They had a strong steel body. The motor worked well in all conditions. The car had a 4-wheel drive system. The Jeep drove through mud and snow. It also drove through hot sand. The Jeep weighed about 1,100 kilograms. It easily carried 4 soldiers with guns. It pulled a cannon up to 800 kilograms. Soldiers quickly learned to drive this car. The car never broke in difficult conditions. It was easy to fix in the field. The Jeeps went to war immediately. They went to Europe and Africa first. Jeeps fought in North Africa in 1942. They helped soldiers in the hot desert. The cars drove on soft, hot sand. They did not get stuck. Commanders drove Jeeps along the front line. They looked for the enemy troops. Jeeps were often used for reconnaissance. Small groups of soldiers drove far ahead. They collected information and returned back. Jeeps fought in Italy in 1943. There were many high mountains there. The roads were narrow and very steep, but the Jeep could go everywhere. Soldiers put machine guns on the roof. The car became a small combat vehicle. Sometimes Jeeps carried wounded soldiers to hospitals. It drove fast, but carefully on bad roads. Doctors and nurses were very thankful. The most important day was June 6, 1944. This was the famous D-Day. Allied troops landed in Normandy, France. Thousands of Jeeps arrived on big ships. The cars drove into battle immediately. Jeeps carried soldiers deeper into the territory. They pulled heavy cannons and trailers. Jeeps drove easily through fields and forests. They helped free France from the enemy. Soldiers said they needed the Jeep to move. Jeeps did not only fight in Europe, they were also in the Pacific Ocean. Soldiers fought there on small islands. There were thick jungles and many swamps. The Jeep passed through forests and wet ground. Soldiers carried weapons and ammunition in them. Sometimes Jeeps even flew to the war. They put them into big gliders. The gliders flew over the sea and ocean. Then the jeep drove out into battle. Many jeeps were sent to Allied countries. England received thousands of these cars. The Soviet Union also received jeeps. This was part of the Lend-Lease program. Soldiers drove them through snow and mud. They often called the car a Willys. Jeeps helped during very cold winters. The motor started even in deep frost. General Dwight Eisenhower said important words. He said the jeep was very important. It was one of 3 vital war tools. The others were the plane and the truck. Eisenhower believed the jeep won the war. Ordinary soldiers agreed with the general. They wrote letters home about their jeeps. Journalists wrote many articles about it. They called the jeep a wonder car. Production continued until late 1945. When the war ended, factories made more cars. More than 640,000 jeeps were built. This was a very big result. No other military car was made so much. Jeeps were in every military camp. They were in Europe, Africa, and Asia. After the war, jeeps stayed in the army. They served for many years. In 1950, the Korean War began. Old jeeps went to the front again. The army made new improved models. These were M38 and M38A1, but the first jeep remains the most famous. Soldiers saw it as a faithful friend. The small military car passed through the war. It was born as a simple machine. It was built in big American factories. It showed great strength in real battles. Millions of soldiers drove jeeps. They trusted the car with their lives. The jeep became a symbol of victory. But its story did not end there. Soon the jeep began a new life. In 1945, the war ended. Willys wanted to keep making jeeps. They made the first model for regular people. They called it the CJ. 2A. CJ meant civilian jeep. This means a civilian jeep. The first car came out in August 1945. The price was about $1,090. The CJ 2A looked like a military jeep, but it had new parts. The back door opened. The colors were brighter. The top was soft. The car was for work and rest. Farmers immediately loved the new jeep. They used it in the fields. The car carried tools and food. It pulled trailers. The jeep worked like a small tractor. It drove through mud and snow. Farmers said it helped more than horses. People used it in forests and mountains. They went hunting and fishing. The CJ 2A was the first mass 4x4 for people. Before this, such cars did not exist. Production grew very fast. More than 214,000 cars were built by 1949. In 1949, the CJ 3A appeared. It was a little better. In 1953, the CJ 3B came out. It had a high hood. In 1955, the CJ 5 began. This model became very popular. They built it until 1983. Later, CJ6, CJ7, and CJ8 came out. Each new model was more comfortable. They added soft seats and protection. But the Jeep always drove off-road. People bought Jeeps for adventures. They went to mountains and deserts. The Jeep crossed rivers and rocks. It was a symbol of freedom. In the 1960s, the Jeep Wagoneer appeared. It was a big, comfortable SUV. It was good for families. The Wagoneer had a soft interior. Many families traveled in it, so the military jeep became a car for peace. The name Jeep became very famous. Soldiers called it Jeep during the war. There are two stories about this name. One story is about the letters GP. This means general purpose. Soldiers said GP and then Jeep. The second story is a cartoon. There was a character named Eugene the Jeep. He could walk through walls. Soldiers compared the car to him. In 1941, there was a test in Washington. The Jeep climbed the Capitol steps. A journalist asked, "What is this?" The driver said, "It is a Jeep." The newspapers wrote about it, so the name spread around the world. After the war, everyone used it. People called any similar car a Jeep, even if it was another brand. Willys applied for the trademark in 1943. They registered it in 1950, but the word was already in the language. Now dictionaries have the word Jeep. It means any small off-road car. It is like the word Xerox. Willys fought for the name, but the word became popular everywhere. Jeep continued to grow. In 1987, the Wrangler came out. It replaced the CJ series. The Wrangler kept the old Jeep spirit. It drove on difficult roads, but it was more comfortable and safe. Later, YJ, TJ, JK, and JL came out. Each model was better. They added strong engines and electronics. But the Jeep never got stuck. Today, Wrangler is a symbol of adventure. People drive it on long trips. They cross rivers and deserts. The name Jeep is a brand. Now the company Stellantis owns it. Jeep won the world. It changed from military to civilian. It helped farmers, families, and travelers. The name Jeep is in many languages. It means a car that goes everywhere. One simple car changed history. It showed that good ideas live long. Millions of people love Jeep today. They say, "This is a real Jeep." They remember its long story. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next episode.